In the rugged expanse of the Old West, where the sun cast long shadows and the air was thick with dust, whispered tales of tribal justice echoed from the canyons to the wide-open plains. It was here that the balance between blood ties and law took a shape as wild as the land itself. Stories of bravery, betrayal, and bonds forged in the heat of the moment ran deep, weaving the fabric of life for those who walked the line between settlers and the tribes that roamed these territories. Ranger John Tellis had seen the consequences of these bonds firsthand. He rode into Blue Hollow one fateful day, dust swirling around his horse's hooves and the weight of a town's unease hanging heavily in the sweltering air. The town was on the brink, caught between the encroaching settlers and the tribal nations whose ancestors had roamed the land long before the first plough broke the soil. As he approached the saloon, the bitter tang of whiskey and the soft strains of a fiddle rose from within. Inside, men with worn faces and weary eyes gathered at rough-hewn tables, eyeing one another with a mix of suspicion and resignation. The saloon keeper, a grizzled man named Hank, shuffled behind the bar, pouring drinks and listening intently to the gossip swirling around the room. "Have you heard?" a voice broke through the murmur. "The Cheyenne are on the hunt for justice. They lost a brave to those damn settlers. Blood will be paid for blood, and one way or another peace won't last." Tellis felt the tension beneath the surface. The storm was coming, and he was both a witness and a guardian caught in the crossfire. He pushed through the crowd, seeking to quell the rising tempers and gather crucial information. "Where's the chief?" he asked Hank, leaning over the bar. "I need to speak with him, now." Hank's eyes darted toward the door, concern etched on his face. "In the back room. But be careful, Ranger. Tensions are high. The loss of a warrior is a heavy burden, and the Cheyenne believe in their bloodline. They'll seek vengeance." Tellis nodded, understanding the unwavering sense of loyalty that bound the tribal nations together. With a steady breath, he made his way to the back room, where the chief, a tall man with a presence that commanded respect, sat surrounded by his advisors. The air was thick with the unspoken weight of grief and anger. "Ranger Tellis," the chief greeted, his voice low and deliberate. "You come seeking peace, but the land is soaked with blood. We want justice for our fallen brother. The settlers must be held accountable." "Justice doesn't always come from vengeance," Tellis replied, keeping his tone even. "But I cannot ignore what has happened. Perhaps we can bring the parties together to talk before more blood is shed." The chief's brow furrowed, the turmoil of conflicting beliefs evident in his expression. "Talk? When a warrior falls, the bloodline demands action. You ask for patience in a land that knows none." "I ask for strategy," Tellis urged, raising his hands in a gesture of peace. "If this escalates, more lives will be lost on both sides. We need to find common ground." The chief studied him, the weight of generations resting on his shoulders. "Very well, but know this. Our ways may not align with yours. My people have suffered long under the hands of those who do not respect our traditions." In that moment, Tellis understood the gravity of his task. He needed to bridge two worlds, each standing firm in their beliefs and pain. The clock was ticking, and the weight of the impending conflict bore down on both the settlers and the Cheyenne. The following days were fraught with tension. Tellis organized meetings, gathering representatives from both sides. However, his attempts at diplomacy were met with skepticism. The settlers feared reprisal, while the Cheyenne demanded respect and recognition for their losses. Each encounter turned into a heated argument, words flying like arrows between the two factions. But with each confrontation, Tellis remained calm, pushing for understanding. He shared the stories of sacrifice, bravery, and the longing for peace that motivated both sides. Slowly, amidst the fiery rhetoric and heart-wrenching tales, something began to shift. On the final day of negotiations, the sun rose like a fiery ball over the horizon. The air was tense, charged with anticipation. Tellis gathered the townsfolk and tribal members at the creek, where the fallen warrior had first crossed paths with his tragic fate. "This is more than just a matter of vengeance," he called out, his voice steady and strong. "It's about honoring a life lost and recognizing the bonds that tie us all to this land." Just then a young woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was a Cheyenne, her eyes fierce yet filled with sorrow. "My brother fought bravely," she said, her voice unwavering. "He deserves justice, but I do not seek more blood. I want his memory honored, not tainted with more violence. We are tied to this land, just as you are. Let us stand together, not as enemies, but as neighbors." The crowd fell silent. Tellis watched as her words sank in, a ripple of understanding flowing through the assembly. For the first time, the settlers saw not just the native as adversaries, but as fellow inhabitants of the same rugged terrain. One by one, others began to speak. Settlers shared their stories of hardship and survival, while tribal members recounted their lineage and reverence for the land. In that historic moment by the creek, bonds began to knit together like the intricate patterns of a tapestry. As the sun dipped low that evening, an agreement was forged. Justice would be served not through revenge, but rather through the establishment of a memorial for the fallen warrior, a symbol of respect that both sides would honor. The bloodline that had once drawn lines of division now became an emblem of unity. Ranger Tellis stood back, watching the two communities come together under the fading light, realizing that true strength lay not in the acts of revenge, but in the courage to seek understanding and peace. The Old West was still a wild and unpredictable place, but now perhaps it held the seeds of a brighter future, rooted in shared stories and mutual respect. As the first stars began to twinkle in the vast expanse of the evening sky, the townsfolk and tribal members gathered around the site where the memorial would stand. The air crackled with a mix of lingering tension and cautious hope. Tellis felt a sense of weight lift, but uncertainty still loomed in the corners of their hearts. Over the next few days, both tribes and settlers worked side by side to create the memorial. It was a simple structure, hewn from local stone and wood, but it was imbued with significance. Each stone laid down represented not just the loss of a life, but a shared commitment to peace. Tellis moved among the workers, listening to their stories and offering encouragement, feeling a community slowly emerging from the fractures of the past. The settlers shared tales of their struggles while carving the land, their dreams punctuated by ambition and often thwarted by the harsh conditions of frontier life. The Cheyenne spoke of their ancestors' connection to the earth, recounting legends of their people and the spirits that dwelled within the hills and valleys. Over time, bonds formed as the laughter of children and the curses of labor filled the once silent air. One afternoon, while the sun cast a warm glow over Blue Hollow, Tellis found himself beside the young woman who had opened the dialogue at the creek, her resolve shining bright. Her name was Ayanna, and she was no stranger to loss. With a determined spirit, she took on the role of mentor and leader among her people. "There's something powerful about this place," she remarked, brushing dirt off her hands. "It's where my brother fell, yet it's also where we might find our way forward." Tellis nodded, appreciating her insight. "It's the connection we all share with this land. In understanding each other's history, we can find a way to honor that connection." Ayanna looked at him, her eyes filled with a mix of hope and uncertainty. "But what if the settlers can't accept us fully? They've always seen the land through a lens of possession, and we've been mere shadows in their tales." "We're writing a new story," he responded, a smile touching his lips. "This memorial stands as a testament to that. With every stone, we replace fear with understanding." But as the days turned into weeks, not everyone was on board with the new path forward. Whispers of dissent echoed in the dark corners of the saloon where old prejudices festered. Some settlers reminded others of the savages who had caused them hardship, while small factions tried to sabotage the nurturing of mutual respect. Tellis overheard these murmurs one evening while he visited Hank at the bar. "Might as well just paint a target on ourselves," a gruff settler grumbled. "You think they'll stop demanding blood? It's clear none of them can be trusted." Tellis knew he had to address these fears head-on. The town could not thrive while divided. The next day, he organized a town hall meeting, inviting both sides to express their concerns, showcasing that communication could break down walls more effectively than iron fists. The square filled with people, some hopeful, others skeptical. Ayanna stood beside him, a symbol of the cooperation they sought to champion. As silence fell, Tellis spoke. "Friends and neighbors," he began, calling them to attention. "I know these past days have stirred up many emotions. Fear of the unknown can twist even the soundest of minds. But today let's confront that fear, not with anger, but with the promise of understanding." A murmuration crescendoed from the crowd. Some nodded, while others remained serious, arms crossed defensively. "This is not just about honoring the life of one brave man," he continued, his voice steady and determined. "It's about forging a new future, where both tribes and settlers can thrive together, where children grow up not fearing one another, but embracing their differences." He gestured toward Ayana. "Here stands a warrior among us. Ayana is a reminder that our stories are intertwined. It's time we weave new narratives that celebrate our shared history instead of clinging to outdated fears." Ayana stepped forward, her voice strong and unwavering. "I've listened to the stories of our ancestors, and I've seen the power of unity. We want peace as much as you do. We didn't seek this conflict, nor do we desire to continue it. My brother's legacy deserves better. We can honor him, not through revenge, but by healing." A tension-filled silence followed her words. Several settlers glanced at one another, uncertainty flickering on their faces. Gradually, the defensive postures eased. Hesitantly, one settler raised his hand. "We've all lost something in this fight," he spoke slowly. "But can we trust that this will truly bring peace?" Tellis seized the moment. "Trust is something earned. It doesn't come easy, but it begins with communication, just as we're doing here. We're building a bridge today." Encouraged, more townsfolk began to speak, some sharing their fears about retaliation from their neighbors. Others recounted their struggles to protect their way of life. A dialogue emerged, and for the first time it felt more like a coming together rather than a fracturing apart. As the sun began to set and the shadows lengthened, Tellis felt hope flicker in that gathering. Throughout the evening, there were tears, laughter, and revelations. Individuals who had avoided eye contact now found shared humanity. Slowly, the whispers of dissent quelled, and a sense of camaraderie began to blossom. Weeks flowed into months, and as the memorial was finally completed, the community gathered for its unveiling. The atmosphere pulsed with anticipation, a gathering not just to honor the fallen warrior, but to celebrate the new life they were fostering. Tellis stood beside Ayana, looking out over the crowd. The stone memorial, adorned with simple carvings that told stories of both tribal and settler histories, stood tall against the backdrop of the twilight sky. It was a moment of unity, a visible reminder that bloodlines could also bind rather than divide. When the solemn moments of remembrance passed and people began to share memories, Tellis took a deep breath. As he watched friends embrace neighbors, he knew they had taken the first step on a long road of healing, one that would carry them through the uncertain future. As their voices lifted in a collective song of peace, Tellis's heart filled. His journey as a ranger was far from over, but in the hearts and minds of those who stood before him, he felt a glimmer of hope, a promise that maybe the Old West could learn to stand united, forging a new path toward justice and understanding. As the last rays of sunlight faded into the horizon, a deep sense of purpose radiated from the gathering at the memorial in Blue Hollow. People exchanged stories of old wounds being healed and aspirations rekindled. The sound of shared laughter floated through the air, mingling with the soft rustle of the wind, a harmonious blend of cultures that had once been at odds. In the days that followed, Ranger John Tellis took it upon himself to ensure the spirit of unity remained alive. The town meeting had set a foundation, but it was now crucial to lay the bricks of cooperation firmly in place. Ayana became his ally, helping him bridge the divide between the Cheyenne and the settlers. Together, they organized joint events, simple at first, a potluck dinner here, a storytelling night there, but they were powerful in their effects. On a warm Saturday, the first community potluck was held at the newly erected memorial. Townsfolk brought dishes that signified their roots, a hearty beef stew from the settlers and traditional corn pudding from the Cheyenne. The tables overflowed with flavors that told stories of various histories mingling together, a culinary journey reflecting the community's evolution. As people filled the square, a nervous tension hung in the air, almost palpable. Tellis stood near the entrance, greeting people with a smile, watching as they began to mingle. Voices rose and fell, laughter echoed, but still, he noticed hesitant glances exchanged between members of both groups. The past had created shadows that weren't easily dispelled. Ayana stepped up beside him, her gaze sweeping over the gathering with both pride and apprehension. "This is just the beginning, Tellis," she said quietly. "We have to show them that healing takes work and commitment." "We will," he replied, full of determination. "This isn't a quick fix, it's a new way forward, and it begins right here, right now." As the sun dipped lower, Ayanna took a deep breath and stepped onto a makeshift platform beside the memorial, signaling for attention. The chatter subsided, and eyes turned toward her. "Thank you all for coming together tonight," she began, her voice resonating through the crowd. "This place, this celebration is a reflection of our strength when we unite instead of divide." Tellys watched her command the audience, her presence a compelling reminder of what could be achieved. "In honoring those we've lost, we must also look forward to the future. Our ancestors once fought for this land, but they also understood the value of understanding and compassion." A murmur of assent rippled through the crowd. Tellys sensed the change momentum. They were ready to reconnect. "Tonight let's share not just food but stories," Ayanna continued. "Stories that will weave the fabric of our community tighter. Let's commit to learning from each other so that our next generation can stand together in strength." The crowd erupted into applause, a moment of recognition that their paths no longer needed to remain separate. As the evening wore on, enchanting tales unfolded. A settler recounted his struggles against the harsh elements of the frontier, the duels with nature that left bruises on his soul. An elder tribal member followed, speaking of visions received from ancestors and the sacred relationships formed with the land. Their voices intertwined, building an intricate narrative that both sides couldn't help but be drawn into. Tellys moved among the tables, listening and engaging. He could almost see the walls of distrust crumbling as laughter broke out, bridging gaps he had once feared would never close. Children darted between the adults, weaving promises of friendship into their games, heedless of the differences that had once defined their families. By the time the moon hung high, spilling silver light over Blue Hollow, the night had transformed from anxious anticipation into genuine warmth. The gathering was a testament to the power of unity, a commitment to acknowledge the past while choosing to create a shared narrative. In a lull of the festivities, Tellys found himself at the foot of the memorial. As he gazed up, he spotted Ayanna chatting with a group of children. Joy illuminated her face. He admired how she had emerged as a leader, her influence bringing forth a deeper understanding of resilience and kindness. Yet even amid this uplifting atmosphere, the reality of challenges remained. In the back of his mind, whispers of dissent had not fully dissipated. So a few settlers clung to old fears, refusing to embrace the new reality. Tellys knew they would need to confront these fears before they could hope for lasting change. The following morning, he gathered his courage and decided to confront the skeptics head-on. He rode into town mind made up, determined to address the remaining doubts among the settlers. The dust kicked up beneath his horse's hooves, mirrored his own tumultuous thoughts. He couldn't ignore the chasm that still existed. He needed to face it. As he entered the saloon, the atmosphere shifted. Conversations quieted, and eyes turned toward him. "I have something to say," he announced firmly, walking to the center of the room. He could feel their uncertainty, but pressed on. "What happened at the potluck was significant. We are on a path toward unity, and yet I see some of you hold on to fear." A grizzled settler, a man known for his stubbornness, stood up, his face lined with years of hardship. "And why should we trust them? They've never been our friends. The Cheyenne are still wild at heart, and they only seek their own." "Those days are behind us," Tellys replied, drawing on every ounce of conviction he had. "The past has hurt us all, but it's time we break the cycle. We can choose to move forward, together." Another voice spoke up, a young settler who had been quietly listening. "But they're our neighbors now. Shouldn't we at least give them a chance?" Encouraged, Tellys continued. "Exactly. Change is uncomfortable, but just think what might flourish in its wake. Together we can cultivate something stronger than fear, a community where every voice matters. But we must be willing to listen and understand one another." The debates twisted and turned like the trails that led through the rugged terrain surrounding them. Some remained doubtful, but others began to rise in support of Tellys's vision. Slowly, that spirit of familial allegiance began to blanket the room. Lawmen who would have once sided with violence now found themselves siding with compassion. As the tension finally broke, Tellys felt the weight of hope settle in. One by one, those who had previously resisted began to shift their perspectives, acknowledging the need to coexist. They were beginning to understand that within every encounter lay the possibility for redemption and growth. Sustained by their newfound resolve, Tellis left the saloon that day, feeling as if he had turned a page in a book still unwritten. They had a long road ahead, but it was one that would weave their narratives into a unified tapestry, where the wild frontier was not merely a harsh land, but a shared home where acceptance could flourish. Ranger John Tellis knew with each passing day that the frontier was indeed wild, but as determined hearts came together, he felt the winds of change rising, a promise that perhaps they could shape their destiny not as adversaries but as allies, a hopeful testament to the power of bloodlines that bind rather than break. As the days turned into months, the sun rose and set over Blue Hollow, illuminating a community that was slowly learning to embrace change. The memorial stood resolutely in the town square, a reminder of the past that would guide them toward a better future. With every festival, gathering, and shared meal, the wounds of history began to heal, replaced by the threads of friendship and cooperation. Ranger John Tellis felt the shift in the air. Stories of unity spread like wildfire, building bridges between settlers and the Cheyenne. Families exchanged visits, shared traditional meals, and even began to learn each other's languages, infusing their lives with a richness that came from genuine connection. Trust was being cultivated, albeit slowly, and Tellis knew that patience and determination would be required, but not everyone was convinced. In the shadows of this burgeoning harmony, a small group of dissenters, still clinging to mistrust and deep-rooted animosity, began to stir trouble. They whispered about taking back what was theirs and spreading rumors that stoked fears of an impending uprising. Tellis could feel the tension simmering just beneath the surface, threatening to boil over. One afternoon, while sitting in the saloon with Ayanna, Tellis overheard snippets of conversation that made his blood run cold. A group of settlers sat at a corner table, their voices low but intense. "It won't be long before they think they can take over. We need to remind them who the real masters of the land are," one man grumbled, slamming his drink on the table. Ayanna tensed beside him, recognizing the danger in those words. Tellis placed a reassuring hand over hers. "We must confront this before it escalates. Silence will only feed their fears." That night, under a canopy of stars, Tellis and Ayanna gathered a mix of settlers and Cheyenne elders for an urgent meeting. They convened at the memorial, its significance now more potent than ever. The flickering lanterns cast gentle shadows, their light illuminating the resolve in everyone's eyes. "Thank you for coming," Tellis began, his voice steady. "We are at a crossroads. While many of us have taken steps toward unity, some among us are still gripped by fear and mistrust. This cannot be ignored." Ayanna stood beside him, her presence a calming force. "We are not here to forget our past, but to learn from it. Those who wish for conflict thrive on division, and it is our responsibility to stand against that." A heavy silence filled the gathering, emotions running high. The settlers exchanged anxious glances. Some nodded, while others frowned, caught between loyalty to their friends and the pull of ingrained prejudices. "We need to prove that we're stronger together," Tellis urged. "Fears can only flourish in darkness. Let's bring them to light. Maybe a shared project, a celebration, something that embodies the trust we are trying to build. Perhaps we could host a harvest festival," Ayanna suggested, excitement lighting her eyes. "A celebration of our crops and our lives. It could demonstrate how our community thrives when we come together." The idea sparked enthusiasm. Voices began to blend in proposals, a contest for the best dish, games for the children, and performers sharing tales and songs. Tellis could feel the energy shift, and for the first time he saw manifest hope where apprehension had thrived. Weeks passed in a blur of preparation and collaboration, as both settlers and Cheyenne pitched in, each contributing their unique skills and traditions. The townsfolk mended fences and painted the memorial, while the Cheyenne gathered food and prepared traditional games. As the festival approached, excitement rippled through the air. On the day of the harvest festival, people adorned the streets with colorful banners, and laughter floated like music. The sun blazed down, golden and warm, transforming the square into a vibrant tapestry of cultures. Tellis stood by as families gathered, recognizing old friends and making new ones. Children darted between booths, their laughter infectious as they played games. It was a scene of community that Tellis had envisioned, a stark contrast to the fear that had once ruled these lands. As the sun dipped low, casting a soft evening glow, Tellis took to the center of the square, calling for attention. "Welcome, everyone. Today is a celebration, not just of our harvests, but of our shared spirit. Let us honor our bonds and the stories that unite us." Cheers erupted, and Ayana stepped beside him, her joy uncontainable. "Tonight, we will share not just our food, but our lives, our hopes for the future. Let us celebrate who we are together." The dancing began, foot-stomping rhythms blending traditions, laughter rising to the stars. Settlers and Cheyenne joined hands, spinning in circles and celebrating the essence of what they had become. More than individuals, they were starting to be a collective story. As twilight cloaked the festival, the air filled with the aroma of shared meals and the heartbeats of joyful music. Old fears began to dissipate like the evening mist, and Tellis felt the weight of the past lift. It was a night to remember, one where walls truly began to crumble. Yet, even amidst the revelry, a familiar face lingered at the fringes. The architect of dissent, the man who had voiced threats of reclaiming what was lost. Tellis noticed him standing apart, arms crossed, his scowl heavy and unyielding. He could feel the dark undercurrent beneath the surface, and it unsettled him. The emotions intertwined, creating an intricate web of tides. Hope mingled with caution. The celebration bore the weight of understanding that not all battles were won in a day. But tonight, in that fleeting moment of connection, they had struck a chord of undeniable progress. As the festival drew to a close, Tellis felt a renewed sense of purpose flicker within him. The bonds forged in that square were fragile, but worth protecting. He stepped away from the festivities and approached the counter again, seeking the dissenting voice he had noticed earlier, ready to confront him directly. "Tonight has been about healing," Tellis stated plainly, his voice steady. "But I sense the shadows still linger. If you wish to speak your mind, I'm here, but know this, we may disagree, but we're building something new here, and I hope you choose to be a part of that." The man stared at him, taken aback by the ranger's unwavering resolve. For a brief moment, the weight of the man's hardened exterior softened, revealing layers of uncertainty and fear underneath. They stood amidst the remnants of celebration, the wounds of history still echoing around them. I don't know," the man muttered, voice breaking. "All I know is that the past feels too heavy to let go." "We carry the past with us, but it doesn't have to weigh us down," Tellis replied. "We can choose to carry it as a reminder of what we've overcome, instead of a burden that holds us back. If you're willing, join us and be a part of shaping our future." As the uncertainty faded, a flicker of understanding shone in the man's eyes. Maybe there was hope for change after all. Together they could build a legacy that honored both their histories while embracing the unknown future. With that step forward, the narrative of Blue Hollow began shifting. Ranger John Tellis recognized that the true power of community lay not in erasing differences, but in celebrating them, creating a shared purpose that transformed adversaries into allies and crafting stories of resilience yet to be written. As night descended gently upon Blue Hollow, with lamps flickering and music fading, Tellis hoped that the promise of tomorrow would continue to bring them closer, intertwining their journeys into one, wild, beautiful, and unmistakably theirs.